Greed, pride, envy, wrath, lust, gluttony, and sloth. You've heard the names, they sound like something out of a medieval morality play, whispered from a pulpit in a stone cathedral. These aren't just dramatic words from an old church sermon. Nope, they're the 7 deadly sins. And what I find absolutely fascinating is how these ancient concepts perfectly map onto our modern lives. They're not dusty relics of a bygone era. They are a timeless framework for understanding the darker, more complicated corners of human nature. Okay, let's rewind a bit. The list as we know it was formalized by Christian theologians like Pope Gregory the Great, way back in the 6th century. They saw these as the root of all other immoral actions. But the reason they've endured for over 1,500 years isn't just because of religious doctrine. It's because they are so profoundly, fundamentally human. They stick around because they're grounded in deep-seated patterns of behavior that you and I see, or even feel, every single day. And now, thanks to the incredible tools of psychology, neuroscience, and behavioral science, we're moving beyond moral judgment. We've started to unravel the biological and psychological machinery behind these tendencies, discovering why they exist in the first place, and how they shape our minds, our bodies, and our relationships in ways those early theologians could have never imagined. Let's kick off with what was often called the original and most serious of all sins: pride. Now, it's important to make a distinction here. Psychologists separate authentic pride, that warm feeling of accomplishment you get from achieving a goal through hard work, from hubristic pride. That's the one we're talking about, the kind that crosses the line into arrogance, conceit, and a sense of superiority, where humility goes right out the window. This is the pride that whispers, "You're better than everyone else." It's closely linked to what we now study as narcissism. Brain imaging studies show that when we feel this kind of pride, areas associated with self-referential thinking light up, but the regions linked to empathy and perspective-taking go quiet. It literally makes it harder to put yourself in someone else's shoes. This excessive pride can also lead to cognitive biases like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where a person's lack of skill in an area makes them their ability. They're too proud to see their own incompetence. And while that inflated ego might give your self-esteem a temporary boost, it's built on a fragile foundation. It's short-lived, and the side effects, alienating friends, refusing to learn from mistakes, and damaging your social connections, usually aren't worth that fleeting high. Next up, greed. That insatiable, gnawing craving for more money, more power, more status, more stuff, you name it. From an evolutionary standpoint, a drive to acquire resources makes sense. It helped our ancestors survive. But greed is when that drive goes into overdrive, becoming an end in itself. Neuroscience tells us that greed plugs directly into our brain's dopamine reward system, the same circuitry involved in addiction. Every time we acquire something new, a bigger paycheck, a new gadget, a social media like, we get a little hit of dopamine, a quick neurochemical buzz that feels good. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Our brains quickly adapt. That initial high fades, and soon we need an even bigger score to get the same feeling. This is known as the hedonic treadmill. You're running and running, accumulating more and more, but your baseline level of happiness doesn't actually change. This cycle can leave us constantly wanting more, trapped in a loop of desire and disappointment, and never feeling truly satisfied. It's a hunger that can't be filled, always focused on the next acquisition rather than appreciating what we already have. Envy is next on our list, and it's a uniquely social sin. You can be greedy all by yourself, but envy requires someone else, someone who has something you want. It's deeply tied to social comparison. Keeping an eye on what others in the tribe had, more food, a better shelter, probably helped our ancestors gauge their own standing and strive for more, which was a key survival mechanism. But in a world of curated social media feeds where we're constantly bombarded with the highlight reels of everyone else's lives, that ancient instinct can become toxic. Neuroscientists have found that feeling envy activates the anterior cingulate cortex, a brain region associated with pain and social distress. It literally hurts to feel envious. This emotional pain can tank your mood, spike your stress hormones like cortisol, and over time, that chronic stress can even weaken your immune system. But it's not all bad. Researchers make a crucial distinction between malicious envy, where you want to pull the other person down, and benign envy, where you're inspired to lift yourself up. When steered in the right direction, that pang of envy can become a powerful motivator, pushing you to work harder, learn new skills, and improve yourself. The key is whether it leads to resentment or ambition. Then there's wrath. that explosive, uncontrolled anger. When you feel threatened or wronged, your amygdala, the brain's ancient alarm system, hits the panic button. This triggers a cascade of physiological responses known as the fight or flight reaction. Your body is flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, your heart rate skyrockets, your blood pressure climbs, and your muscles tense up, preparing you for a physical confrontation. This response was incredibly useful for facing a predator on the savannah, but it's less helpful when your threat is a slow driver or a critical email. If you let that raw emotion run wild, wrath can be incredibly destructive. It wrecks relationships, leads to impulsive and terrible decisions, and clouds your judgment by shutting down the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain. But the damage isn't just social. Chronic anger and hostility put immense strain on your cardiovascular system. Studies have consistently linked high levels of anger to an increased risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, and even stroke. So this sin isn't just a metaphor for spiritual decay. It could literally be a matter of life or death. It's a powerful reminder that managing our emotional responses is crucial for both our mental and physical health. Lust. This one often gets a bad reputation, tangled up in centuries of shame and repression. But let's be clear from a biological perspective. Lust, or sexual desire, is not inherently a problem. It's a totally natural and fundamental human drive, rooted in our biology and fueled by hormones like testosterone and estrogen. It's the engine of procreation, essential for the survival of our species. The trouble, as with all these sins, arises from imbalance and excess. The deadly aspect of lust emerges when it becomes compulsive, detached from genuine connection, and leads to the objectification of others. When a person is reduced to a mere object for satisfying a craving, empathy is lost. This is where the science gets really interesting. Lust is primarily driven by the brain's reward circuit, seeking immediate gratification. Love, on the other hand, involves different neurochemicals like oxytocin and vasopressin, which are associated with bonding and attachment. When lust becomes an all-consuming pursuit, research shows it can start rewiring that reward system, similar to a behavioral addiction. This can make it harder to form the deep, lasting emotional intimacy that comes from genuine connection, as the brain is conditioned to seek the quick hit rather than the slow, steady burn of a meaningful bond. And what about gluttony? The classic image is of someone feasting to excess, but in our modern world, gluttony has evolved. It's way more than just eating too much food. It's about overconsumption in all its forms. Think binge-watching an entire series in one weekend, endlessly scrolling through social media feeds, over-shopping for things you don't need, or even workaholism, the gluttonous consumption of work. It's the relentless pursuit of more, without savoring or digesting any of it, chasing endless experiences without ever really being present. When we focus on food, the science is clear. Consistent overconsumption can wreak havoc on our internal regulatory systems. It disrupts the delicate balance of hormones like ghrelin, which signals hunger, and leptin, which signals fullness. Your body can become resistant to these signals, meaning you no longer feel satisfied even when you've had enough. This creates a dangerous feedback loop, driving further overeating and significantly raising the risk of long-term health problems like obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease. Gluttony, in essence, is a failure of self-regulation, a desire for instant gratification that ultimately undermines our long-term well-being. Finally, we arrive at sloth. This isn't just about being a couch potato or enjoying a lazy Sunday, that's rest, and rest is crucial for physical and mental recovery. Sloth is a more profound state, a persistent apathy, a spiritual or emotional laziness, the consistent urge to avoid necessary effort. It can manifest as procrastination, indifference, and a neglect of one's responsibilities to oneself and others. Psychologically, sloth can be a symptom of something deeper, like depression, anxiety, or a crippling fear of failure. It's easier to do nothing than to try and possibly fail. But if you get stuck in a state of chronic inactivity, the consequences are severe. It doesn't just drag your body down through muscle atrophy and weight gain, it actively harms your brain. Studies show that a sedentary lifestyle can lower cognitive function, impair memory, and increase feelings of anxiety and depression. It can even reduce your brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to adapt and form new connections. The antidote, according to therapists, is something called behavioral activation. The principle is simple: action precedes motivation. By forcing yourself to engage in small, manageable tasks, you create momentum and release mood-boosting neurochemicals like endorphins, which can help break the cycle of apathy. So after looking at them through this scientific lens, here's what I find so incredibly interesting. All 7 of these sins are not alien invaders of the human spirit. They are our own natural and often necessary human drives, simply taken to a destructive extreme. Pride grows from our fundamental need for self-worth and social standing. Greed and envy are distorted versions of our survival instinct to acquire resources. Wrath is the raw, untamed energy of our self-protection mechanism. Lust is the biological imperative for connection and procreation. Gluttony comes from the essential drive for nourishment and sustenance. And sloth? That's the shadow side of our critical need for rest and energy conservation. In moderation, guided by wisdom and context, these drives keep us alive, motivated, and thriving. But when they run unchecked, when they become the masters instead of the servants, they can systematically chip away at our well-being, corrode our relationships, and ultimately, sabotage our own happiness. The big takeaway here isn't to feel guilty or to try and surgically remove these impulses. That's impossible. The goal is to cultivate balance. It's about developing the self-awareness to recognize these drives as they arise, practicing the self-regulation to manage them effectively, and showing compassion for ourselves and others when we inevitably stumble. So, maybe the 7 deadly sins are less about a set of hard and fast religious rules, and more like a diagnostic mirror. They reflect the precise fault lines in our nature, where our basic human instincts can either lift us up to achieve great things, or drag us down into patterns of self-destruction. And it's in that awareness, in understanding the science behind the sin, that I think we find the real power to choose a different, more balanced path.